because I want to be respectful of your time. Okay. All right. So first, and I know that in our intro session, I did, a little bit of this, but I covered so much. So I'm going to review it again, and then we'll go and do more advanced. So first, what really is data validation? So essentially, data validation is what Excel will accept being entered into a cell. So I want to be really clear here. It's not copy and pasting. If you paste into a cell, you will obliterate the data validation. So it's only what you manually type that it's going to control. The most common example of this is a drop-down menu. So we're going to start with that. So first, where do you find it? So assuming you're already on your home ribbon, you're going to go to data, and it may look slightly different. It's still there on the PC. Data validation, and you're going to get a dialog box. Now, it was already set up, so I'm actually just going to pick a different cell. And this is just a strategy for me. Normally, if you're going to fill this out and you have a spreadsheet, there's going to be, text, so you know what's related to it. But just because I'm picking a random box to start with, I always like to put a color in it so I know where it is. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to data validation, and I'm going to get this first dialog box. So you'll notice that the default is any value, meaning that you can pretty much type anything into the cell and it'll accept it. So we're going to go down, and we're actually going to go over most of these choices, but I want to start with the most common one, and that is list. So when you do list, you get a source document, source place where you can enter the items. If it's a short list, you can type them in with each item separated by a comma. If you forget the comma, you're going to get a weird thing, and I'll actually show you what that looks like if you do it wrong. Okay, I got to come up with something different than my normal one, but we'll use dog, cat, fish. So notice I have each word separated by a comma. When I do that, as soon as I do that and I'm on that box, I'm going to get those choices. Everybody okay so far? So now you can also manually enter the item and it'll accept it. But if you pick something else, it won't. It's going to reject it. Now, notice what it says. I can't make it bigger, but this value does not match the data validation. So to be quite honest, for most people, they won't know what the heck that means. So we're really going to learn how to customize those instructions, okay? So the first thing, just starting there, there's another way that you can do this, is one of two choices. You can also refer to a range. So if over here I had dog, cat, and fish, and again, I'll just pick a different box and also color it. I could do the same thing, go data validation, list, and go to my range symbol and select the items. And now that's going to give me dog, cat, and fish. Okay. All right. So just a couple of things. How do you clear it? Well, here's the first thing. You can definitely, once you have it, scroll down. So notice when I scroll down, I didn't do a great job of it because it already had dog selected. So I wouldn't want to do that. I want to have it what? Blank, then scroll down. Now they're blank, but now it applies to all of these cells. So if you were doing something like you were doing some sort of a spreadsheet where people had to select what building or what department, you wouldn't necessarily have to do the data validation for every individual cell. You could do it for the top one and then scroll down the column. Everybody okay? Pretty easy. And now it applies. Okay. So right now well, let me actually show you one more example. I'm actually going to go to a different tab just because it's a big list, but we're going to come back here. So just to show you that it can really be quite useful and nice, I have this list. It's actually a fake list of employee names. Okay. And again, following my practice of knowing where I put it, I'm just going to put color there. All right. So now I can go data validation list and select my whole list. And hit enter. And now it applies to my whole list. And if you notice, I actually even get a scroll down bar. So theoretically, I can have 50 or 100. I think once you get past about 150, it gets cumbersome. I would say this, you have to sort your list first if you want them alphabetically. And it is dynamic. So I'll give you an example. The second name is Ray Anderson. If I change that to Jeff Olafson, that will immediately be reflected in the list. So if you update your list, there's another little trick that I would recommend considering. You can create a table with, and you can actually name the tables. I'm going to get too crazy because I want to focus, but you can create a table with this. And one thing about tables is they automatically will add an additional item, and then that'll get reflected in your list. You normally don't have a problem if you enter an item in the middle anyway, because it'll automatically adjust. So I'm just going to show you something that you'll just know is I just put a number in, right? So if I now go here, notice as I go, it should be in there. There it is. See how I have my number? So if I enter an additional cell to widen the range. Okay.
Now, what's the difference between this and going to sort and go to AZ or something like that?
Well, you could certainly sort this list, but the thing is, it's the ability to refer to it in the dropdown that's really good. So let me give you a practical use of this. Suppose that, and I'm not going to take the time to type them out, but let's say that I had all the schools in Chappaqua here, okay? So I think it's John Jay. So I have John Jay. I'll just put a couple in, I remember. I think it's Seven Bridges. This is my, he's from Chappaqua, so I remember, and it's the Bell School. So now if I have people typing that, they might make typos, but if I have it referred to a data validation, I'm never going to have a mistake in the typing. So then if I want to later on do a sort of things, I'm not going to end up with two different items because somebody called it J High School or they use Seven Bridges Middle School and says Seven Bridges. I'm going to get consistency. Do you follow? So that alone is an enormous advantage to doing data validation, because even for yourself, you can't make a typo. All right. Anyone else have any questions so far? But I want to just show you that you could work off a large list. Like all the employees in a building, I don't know that I would do all the budget codes. That's a little too crazy. But you certainly could do, 30, 40, 50 items without a problem. Okay. So the problem with this, the way it's set up, is I anticipated that people only have 3 different kinds of pets. What if they had a different pet than the ones that were here? So they have a snake. Well, all of a sudden it won't take it. And maybe I don't want that. So what you'll notice here is there are three, and we're going to really zoom in this session on all of these three different dialog boxes, the input and the error alert. But I'm just for a moment going to skip to error alert. We're going to do a little quick thing. I'm going to uncheck this box. It's the box up top. If I uncheck it, I disable the rejection of any item other than the ones that were on the list. So now, and I'll scroll down so it applies to all of them. So now, yes, I can select from the list. Yes, I can type any of the ones that are here, but I can also add anything else. When I have a box that allows me to, and this is terminology, yes, you can. The only thing is you got to make sure that both of the documents are available. My experience is it's you can certainly link it to a different tab. I think that's always safer. But yes, you can definitely link it to a different document. My general recommendation would be don't. My general recommendation would be if you have that information in a different document, move that tab in that document into this, into this spreadsheet, because then if you share it or it's transferred, you don't have to worry about a link across documents. But it would work, absolutely. Okay. So now it's what it changes its terminology. So if it only allows the items that are selected, it's considered a drop-down menu. If it provides you with drop-downs, but you also have an ability to enter something else, it's a combo box. So and the reason they call it a combo box is it allows the entry plus it's a drop-down. Okay, so now the way this is set up, it's a combo box. Everybody clear on that? And again, it depends on use. So I'm actually going to change it back. I only have to do it in one, and then I can scroll down by just selecting for now. So now it will reject Bird, but it says the following: the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined in the cell. This is unintelligible to anybody other than an Excel, ease person. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I want to talk to you about how you can control that. So if we go to data validation, same tab for the errors, I have an ability to write an individual message. So I'm just going to jokingly, okay, so I'll do one that's not a joke, okay? So I'll say pet selection. All right, it's a little wordy, but but I want you to see what happens. If I select any of the ones that are here, nothing happens. But if I try to pick one that isn't on my list, so notice I get a different answer there. I get a what? A customized answer that specifically I wrote. So if I'm developing the spreadsheet for myself, it probably doesn't matter. But if I'm developing a spreadsheet for someone else and I want to explain to them why we're not allowing them to do that, like, for example, they entered amount above our per diem, or as I'll show you later, they tried to issue a PO for a year that wasn't within the school year. Instead of just getting a rejection with no understanding, they're getting a what? An explanation that makes some sense for them. They can correct it. All right. So I'm just going to everything I do here, I want to do more than once just so you can see how it's done. So I'm kind of like going to repeat it. Okay. So I'm going to go to data value. I don't have to retype, but as long as I type anything in here, it's going to what? It's going to replace the default message with whatever I wrote. Okay. And be nice, folks. Okay. But that can be really helpful so that someone's not scratching their head and trying to understand why they can't do what I'm asking them to do. Okay. So that's pretty much it for lists. What I would like to do is show you a really good use of this. And I know I did that on the first day, but it's been a while. Let me show it to you again. Okay. And then we'll go on. So I was working with a district. It was a district in Westchester County, New York. But actually Chappaqua is using this. Although I think the version they're using is a Google Sheets version. And I want to make a point about this. This is one of these things that ports beautifully from Excel to Google Sheets. So if you develop this in Excel and you upload it into Google Sheets, it'll work fine and beautiful. Okay. And that's great because we have some districts that are big on Google. Okay. So let me show you. And by the way, it was for facilities. So I had a facilities department. We were working with, I had been asked to do some training for the head custodians. And they have a lot of skills, but some of them are not great at writing. It's not their thing. Okay. So we said, wouldn't it be great if we could give them the choices? By the way, I got the idea from Frontline, from something that Frontline has called IEP Direct, where when the teachers, special ed teachers, want to select goals for the students, they don't have to write them out. They can select them from a list. So that's where I had the idea. Okay. So let me show you what this looks like. Okay. And it doesn't really matter the form itself, because in some cases I've had to adjust the form because of whatever the contracted evaluation was for the district. But I just want to show you how it works. First, I want to show you where all the information is. So I have all the information here. So in response to Tammy's question, I would normally not, when I was setting this up for a district, put the information here. I'd have this information on a different tab. Usually what I have actually is one master, the name of each of the employees in a building, and then a tab with the data. I usually wouldn't put in another spreadsheet, but I would put it into a separate tab. Okay, but for the ease of training and moving stuff around, I just put it down below here. Okay. So let's take a look at how this works. So there's the names of all of the employees. So I need to select an employee. I select it. I don't think I filled out locations, but I did do titles. So these are the different titles. Okay. So I can select the title. And then they use a rating system. It's a 3-scale rating. If it's a 4-scale, we could put in 4, but that's what we used. Okay. And then for each item, I left enough room for 4 possible comments. Could have made it 5, but we felt that that was enough. Okay. Well, I don't want to pick the same one twice. Okay. And I'm just picking these at random. They actually have a logical sense. All right. If you really look at the list, and they can be updated. If you decide you want to add more items to the list, you just go to the tab. Notice though, when I go to do the second one, there's a different set of items. So it's not the same items. It's based on the category. All right. And the same thing, the ratings are the same. So let me just do a little explanation here. This is a drop down. This is a drop down. This is a drop down. These are all combo boxes because I allowed the latitude for the supervisors. If there wasn't any one of the ones on the list that they wanted, they could type in their own individual one. I would hope that they would be more diplomatic, but I just want to show you that it's flexible enough that they can enter their own items. Okay, so here we have a non-financial use of Excel. because there's absolutely no numbers in this, and only using what you've already learned today. So you could definitely set this up based on what you've learned from this session. And if you can set up an evaluation, you can also set up a checklist for inspections. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do with this that aren't even things involving numbers. And then there's all the ones with numbers. Okay. Any questions so far? Everybody good? I like to stop every once in a while and see how we're going. Give me, I've decided a new approach. Give me, well, it's too many of you have your cameras off. So I'm not sure I understand the question. How do you do a checklist? So what would you mean by a checklist?
I mean, how do you check it off to say, like, you have a list of
Well, I could have
stuff
5 items and then have a box
in
next.
rows? Each row has an item and you want to check it off.
So what I could do, this is, I'm not sure I'm prepared to do it this second, only because I don't remember what the symbol is for the checks. Okay. All right. But you could, because you need a special character for the checks, but I could show you the X, right? So if I wanted to do an attendance sheet, right? And I had, because this is kind of like, so I could come up here and do data validation and actually only have one choice.
You're not sharing your screen right now.
Oh, I'm not sure, Mike. Thank you for reminding me. All right, so let me do that. All right. So here I just have a list of names. So let's say this was the attendance sheet, right? So I could just go to the first item and do, I'll do an X because it's easy. But you could do a check. You just have to check the special character that'll let you do a check. I have to look that up. So now I scroll this down. So it's going to be blank. If they were present, I go. And there we go. So I could do the same thing with check marks, right? Did that answer the question? Now you could, I think I put one in here. Let's see. Every time I do it a little differently. So I could do something. This is kind of cute. All right. All right. And now do data validation list. And now I have my ratings. Okay.
So
do-
Jeff, when you set this form up though, how did you get it to like where it says Park and Recreation Department Employee Evaluation Form?
Yes.
It's not showing the little column lines for, you know,
Yeah,
in
oh,
between BC.
that's a little bit of merging cells. And it did take a little bit of time to do that. So what I did actually is I said, okay, I need all these cells, and then I just merged them. Here I didn't merge them. So it's a little just creative work on the aesthetics. I can always remember merge a series of cells. And so these would be merged.
I
It is
see.
a little tricky because I have to think in advance how many I need. So I can't do it with less than 4 because I need 4 here. Do you follow? So I just create 4 and then here I just merge all of them. Here I don't. So notice, by the way, there is a symmetry to this. So for example, this
Right.
is 2, and then I just merge those 2 and notice they line up. Same thing here. I needed 2 here. And so I have 2 here. I just spread it across all of them. So it does take a little bit of work, but it's not undoable. And you can always move the sizes around. Got it? So yeah, it was a little work. That probably took more work than the data validation, but you can do it. Any questions so far? All right, so let's take a look at some of the other things that you can do with data validation. Okay, well, actually, before I do that, let me cover one more thing. We can go back to our little, and I gave you some screen captures here so you'd see what we're doing. Okay. So I want to go back to my dialog box for the data and drill in on just one more thing. So I'm gonna do more on the errors later, okay? But I want to go now to input message. So input message allows me to give somebody a warning before they type, okay? And this is overkill, I have to admit, okay? So as soon as I hover over or touch the box, and unfortunately I can't make it any bigger, but if you zero in on it, can you see it? It says, please only enter an approved pet. So it's going to actually create a little advanced instructions on what you're supposed to do as soon as you hit that cell. So in effect, what I've done now is, and I didn't write a custom message here, is I've told people in advance what to do, and if they mess up, I've explained to them what they did wrong. Okay. So little trick. I can do data validation, select any value, and still put in an input message. So here's an example. So someone's about to do it and they get a message, what? Put in your legal name. No, no nicknames. No. Do you follow? So I'm just giving them a little instructions. I don't have to have it visible on the sheet. It only comes up when you hit the what? The item. So how many of you, I'd like to ask you, how many of you were familiar with that? There is another way to do this, but I like to do it this way. What do you think? So I could do it as it relates to one of the items where it's going to reject, but I can even do it with any value. And from time to time, I do like to put those in if I'm writing a spreadsheet for someone else, just to give them some information that helps them do it correctly, like put in your legal name. So how many were familiar with this, or anyone? Yes, no? Okay. Can you see the benefit? Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna dive a little deeper in looking at some of the choices of the things here that can be really useful. Okay. So, and it's just a question of going down the list of what was available. Okay. So once again, I'm just gonna pick a spot, even though I had it done already, so you guys can see me in action here. All right. So if I go data, by the time I do this, you're all going to remember where it is. Data validation. So you remember that we looked at list, but there are all these other items. So I want to start with date. So here we have our dates. Okay. So I'm going to manually enter it. And I believe everybody here works for a school district. I don't think there's anyone who doesn't. Because it might be slightly different with a college, or definitely with a government agency. I just learned that recently. So all schools are on a school year. So the current school year began on 7/1/21 and ends on 6/30/22. That's our school year. So what I'm going to tell it is only accept a date that is between those two dates. So for example, if someone was doing a PO request or a hiring request, okay, and where we run into this problem is usually towards the end of the school year where people make a mistake, or the beginning, right? So let's say that somebody makes a common error. They're in June of 22 and they go 7/11/22. So it's next school year. It rejects it, won't accept it. Now, of course, this is not very descriptive. So remember what we said, we could go in and we could write a different error alert, and that might be on the titles, you're a little limited. So I don't even have to do a title, okay? Okay. So by the way, if they pick a date that's within the school year, it's not going to be a problem. So if they pick 5/11/22, it's just going to take the date. It's only when you go on one side or the other. And this also happens a lot when, just at the very start of of a new year, people make mistakes. So they go 2/10 and they select 21, they select next year. So it says the date you selected falls outside of the current school year. Usually at that point, they realize what they did and correct it. If it was towards the end of the year, they may have to wait, until, they can't issue a purchase order until the new year starts. So everybody, let me stop again. Any questions on that? Is that clear to everybody? I assume most of you that work in schools know that there's a school year, right? And particularly those in finance, you also know, or even those who work in a school building, no, you can't do stuff that falls outside the school year. The reason I mentioned its difference is I learned that towns in New York and cities in New York, they run on a calendar year. So their year would be, like the normal calendar year would end on December 31st and start on January 1st. But for schools, we do a school year, a fiscal year. Okay. Let's keep going. So dates are really good. I had one with, I had a facilities one where the rule is, this is for building use. Okay. So the rule is, you can't request, and they have to pay, there's a fee based on the hours. So they can't request less than an hour and they can't request more than 3 hours, because we just don't do that. Particularly during the week, we don't allow anybody beyond 3 hours. Okay. So here, again, I'm just going to color it first so I know where it is. And for this, because it's hours, I'm going to use whole number, because we're not allowing any fractions. I'm not doing an hour and a half. So the minimum is 1 hour. The maximum is 3 hours. And now at this point, if they select 2 hours, it's fine. If they try to do 0.5, it'll reject it. If they try to do 4 hours, it'll reject it. And I don't think I need to repeat that you can then write an error message that tells them that, or even in instructions beforehand that includes that it can only be 2 hours. Everybody okay? All right. So let's deal with an interesting example where we might have some nuance. Okay, so we have a per diem of 37. I assume everybody knows what a per diem is. If you don't know what it is, just type, I don't know what it is, and then I'll explain. If you do know what it is, you can just be silent. Okay. So I assume most people know what a per diem is. Okay, it's like a meal reimbursement. Here I want to use decimal. Less than or equal to 37. So now if you try to do a reimbursement for 35, it'll take it. You try to do 37, it'll take it. You try to do 37.50, it won't. Okay, everybody clear? So now we're going to get into a little nuances here. So first of all, I manually typed 37, but that's not really a great idea. I'm much better off selecting it from the data table. Why? Because if I have this as a form and it's all set up, and next year they raise this to 38, probably with the inflation the way it is, it'll be raised to 40. So now I don't have to change all my data validations. They're automatically going to get reflected. So if you're dealing with something that like per diem, you're better off doing it by reference. Everybody clear on this? Anybody need to see it again, or you good? Now, here's where it gets tricky or interesting, so to speak. So among the error options, the one that we knew how to shut it off and we knew how to stop, but there are actually two more. Okay. So warning is really interesting. Warning is really interesting. So I'm going to select warning. Okay. So here, what I'm going to say is, okay. And I could probably write a more elegant message here. Okay. Do you want to proceed? Okay. So watch what happens here, because it's really interesting. So if I put in 39, there's no problem. If I put in 41, it doesn't, it gives me a warning with a choice. Okay, it gives me a warning with a choice. So if I go no, it won't allow the amount. So somebody goes for $1, I don't want to go through the trouble and waiting. I'm, waiting 3 more months to get my money. I'll just change it to 40. Okay. But if they want to apply, they can. If they say yes, it'll accept it. So it allows a number that exceeds it, but it gives you a warning that you're doing something above that. Okay, everybody let me stop again, see if anybody has a question they want to unmute on that. So can everybody see, for those who can see, can you see the benefit of that in some cases? And there, again, are little tricky ways you can use this. Here's just a little tricky, almost sneaky way of using it here. And I have to, you're not seeing it, so I know I have to turn it back on. So here I'm gonna select crazy. Let's see, decimal. Oh, actually it has to be less than or equal to 0. So what I've just done here is I basically said, if you put in, well, I shouldn't have done less than or equal to it. I should have done just less than. Crazy. So that means it's gonna reject everything. It's gonna reject all the amounts, right? Let me, oh, I made a mistake. I forgot where I put it. Oh, there it is. Okay. Let me just mark it. Okay, so here's how you might use this. So now I go back in. And here I go to error alert, I do warning, right? And I say, how do you spell alcohol? A-L-C-H-O. Okay. You could. You can definitely protect cells. It's not always so easy. How do you spell alcohol? Somebody help me out.
C-O-H-O.
And what is it? A-L?
A-L-C-A-C-O. Alcohol.
H-O-L.
H-O-L.
Yeah, I'm brain fry on spelling today.
It's
Okay.
Wednesday.
Yeah. So we do not reimburse for alcohol. I attest. And it would probably be better. I should have, I attest there's no alcohol included in this bill. I'm not even sure I need a question there, yes or no. That's pretty obvious, right? So watch what happens as soon as I do this, and I put in an amount. See, it says we do not do I attest this bill contains no request. So they say yes, then accepts it. So they can't come back later and say, I didn't know. They actually had to affirmatively do what? Actually hit another button saying there's no alcohol here. Now, of course, I could go further and include a warning too, you know, that says we don't reimburse for alcohol. Or this could have been, we don't reimburse for sales tax too. Okay. But I'm just trying to point out, you can actually even have a warning in something where you intend to accept all the amounts, just do less than 0. Isn't that kind of neat? I think that can be kind of cool. Okay, I gave you some more examples here. You can actually do one with a customized formula. So this is a little trickier. I already did the formula here. I'll go through this quickly because I want to show you this. But what this involves is an employee's purchase of insurance. So they are only allowed to purchase insurance. This is term insurance in excess of 10 times their annual salary. So if you make 90,000, you can only purchase insurance with a face value of 900,000. The reason for that is that the district, you know, shares in the cost, either in some kind of a split. Okay. Everybody with me? So I can show you what it looks like. I have it set up already. It's just this formula that's up here. You do the formula. So the formula basically says this amount, which is this cell, cannot exceed their salary times 10%. And then I usually like to do it first and then copy it in. And these can be scrolled down. So if you scroll down, it'll adjust for the columns, you know, for the items. So let's see how it works in action. So I request 900,000 in insurance, it accepts it. If I try to buy 1 million, it rejects it. But it won't reject it for this person, because their salary is 120, so they can buy 1 million too. So you could do something, you know, that really relates. I even done some of the other examples I gave, I'm not going to do with you here, but like, for example, you know, if we only allow full-time employees to make a request, if there's full-time here, it'll accept it. If it's part-time, it won't. So if this person requests days, it'll take it, but that one won't, because they're not a full-time employee. Okay. So you do have the ability to get kind of fancy with this. So I thought I'd show you a one that's, well, let me stop. Any questions so far? So this is a little advanced, I have to admit, but most of these formulas are not terribly complicated. But I did want to point out that among the choices is a custom formula. Text length just indicates how many spaces you'll accept. And the only thing I can think of, I can't even think of an example of that. You know, some of the DMVs or whatever, you know, they require you to have like 3 codes that represents the first 3 letters of your last name or something. That would be the only example where you're only allowing 3 strings. Most of the others, and time is not used often, but date is. And then custom could be anything that involves any kind of a custom formulas. And my experience is most of the formulas are simple, like 10 times the salary, or you could even do like a Medicaid reimbursement where, you know, it would be based on your birthday. You can't do it till you're eligible. And if we had everybody's birth dates, we could then calculate. Any questions so far? So we have about, give or take, 10 or 11 minutes left. I want to show you a really cool one. Okay. So by the way, if this like makes your head explode, don't worry about it. Okay. But I know that we have people with different levels of interest, and this is kind of an advanced use of data validation. It's called a data dependent dropdown. Okay. Data dependent dropdown. And I'm gonna set it up and lay it out in a way that's pretty simple. So if you follow the steps, it's not really that difficult. Okay. All right. So I have one up above. I'll just show you what it would be like. And I don't believe I did it yet. So I think no, it's actually probably in there already. But I can do a different one. Okay. All right, so actually I like this one. Just hold on a second. I want to just, so to speak, get rid of whatever was there, so we can start from scratch. So I'm just going to get rid of some of these, the grade ones, and I'll explain to you what I'm doing in a minute. Okay. So here we have 3 different grades. So if you've noticed, I did one particular thing that's a requirement here. I can't have a space between the names of the titles. I could do like an underslash, but because of a requirement under Excel, I can't have any like spaces. Okay. So what I'm going to do is for each one of these items, I'm going to name the range. So and that's why laying it out this way is going to make your life easier. So I go over and I highlight the teachers for the first class, and I'm going to call this grade 1. So it has to match. Then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to call this grade 2. Then I'm going to come over here and call this grade 3. Okay, you with me so far? Now I have to do my first data validation. That one is the easiest one in the world. I already had it set up, but I could do it again. Okay. So basically, I'll just clear it. By the way, the way to clear it is to go to any value and then it clears it out. Okay, so here I'm going to go data validation list, and I'm going to select the 3 grades. And I'm going to enter it. Okay. So now I come to here. And I believe I already had done it, but it may have wiped it out. But basically what you do here, I'll just show it to you so save a little time, is I do a reference to the cell. So I'll just do this one over again. So I just cleared it. So I now go data. I still have to pick list, but when I'm asked for the source, I give as the source that cell, the cell where the different grades were selected. But I have to use a special function here called the indirect function. And it's only used for this purpose. Okay, so it's equals indirect and a reference to the cell where the grade selection is. And then I hit enter. So now watch, because this is really cool. If I select grade 1, notice which teachers it gives me. The teachers in grade 1. If I select grade 2, it gives me the teachers in grade 2. If I select grade 3, it gives me the teachers in grade 3. So why is it called a data dependent dropdown? Because which dropdown it gives me depends on which item I selected. So how does it know that? Because of the range selections. It knows that when you hit grade 3, it's that range. So you have to set the range first. And by the way, if you ever want to see what your ranges are, you can always go to formulas and look up your ranges. You can see what the range is. It'll show you what it is. The other way to do it is just to highlight it. And notice as soon as I highlight it, up in that tab, instead of giving me a cell address, it's going to give me the what? The name. Got it? So that's a data dependent dropdown. It's really not all that complicated. The only thing that may foul you up is you got to remember you have to do a reference to the cell, which is E11, but you have to use the indirect function. If you just wanted, for example, to show what's here, you could just do that. But if you wanted to pull the drop downs, you have to have it. You have to use the indirect function. Okay, so it's cool. I realize it's a little advanced. Notice here, I just gave you a little instruction. It has to be one word. So I could definitely do it like this. I could do grade /1, okay? And they're not case sensitive, but I cannot have grade and a space 1. That's just it's a syntax requirement under Excel that ranges have to be one word. Okay. So I'm going to stop